I'm Deepak Chopra. You're watching New Realities.
Since I had interviewed Deepak, I guess maybe 20 times every time he has a new book come out, he says, let's do an interview. And so I said, Deepak, I have a new book that just came out. Do you want to talk about that? So here we are on the other end of the table. And, I think Deepak is one of the most influential people within the modern day cultural spiritual movement. So I'm curious about his understanding of what's been called UFOs, UAPs. But I first want to say, because we had a conversation the other day, that, and I'll say this to you, Deepak, you're coming from an ahistorical perspective where it's all consciousness outside of time. And I'm coming from a historical perspective where there's the movement and evolution of thought. So how do we bring these two things together where, of course, it's all consciousness and there's a progression of ideas, history, evolution, technology within a cultural context? You know what I mean?
For the moment, let's put aside the consciousness element. We've
Okay.
discussed that forever, you and I, and there's no
Right.
problem there. The universe is God's dream, and leave it at that.
Mhm.
But now, coming from a historical perspective, there was a time when humans believed the earth was flat. There was a time when humans believed that there was, the strict description of book of Genesis. But now, 14 billion years later, post Big Bang, if you have to go with the scientific model, if you go Google the following question, how many galaxies are there? It's about 2 trillion. That's the current estimate of the number of galaxies. How many stars are there? 700 sextillion. How many planets are there? Uncountable trillions. Now, again, recently, because we have the ability to put telescopes out there, I'm not talking about the Hubble telescope, but the latest ones. Everyone has a telescope. Japan, Dubai, India, China, everybody has a telescope there. James Watson telescope, the latest ones. They look at what is called the Goldilocks zone to look for a habitable planet. And according to the current scientific terminology and Goldilocks zone understanding, if a planet is too close to its sun, life as we know it is not possible if because it's too hot. If it's too far away from its sun, life as we know it is not possible. It's too cold. But if it's within a certain range, we happen to be planet Earth in the Goldilocks zone. According to current scientific models, there could be 40 billion habitable planets in just the Milky Way galaxy. Now, if the Milky Way galaxy is the average galaxy, 100 billion stars, then there are uncountable trillions of habitable planets, theoretically, mathematically, and every other which way. So, what is planet Earth? Planet Earth is less than a grain of sand in all the beaches of the Earth. One
Right.
grain of sand in all the beaches of the Earth. And so here we are, a speck of dust in the infinite void, somewhere in the junkyard of infinity, because we've already contaminated space, um, trying to figure out what reality is. So your book is very useful, making contact, because you're saying that for the first time, and it's been evolving over a couple of decades, for you, more than a couple of decades, you've
Right.
been kind of a alien hunter, extra ET hunter,
Right.
or ET spotter for a while. I think this is a very timely book because it does show us that the world is opening up to a bigger reality, and that we're not just isolated sentient beings on a minor planet, but we could be actually part of a bigger inheritance of spiritual sentient beings,
Mhm.
some like us, maybe some more advanced, maybe some less advanced, some more advanced technologically, but maybe not emotionally and spiritually,
Right.
some as backward as us because we're still living in medieval medieval mindsets as hunter gatherers with modern capacities, and that's not a good combination.
Mm.
So that's what I have to say. Congratulations on your
Oh,
book. It's very interesting.
mm.
I've been reading
Oh, good.
slowly, and I love the idea that you start with the government mindset and our future among the stars,
Mhm.
and why UFO disclosures are becoming more dominant in the media,
Mhm.
and why the governments of the world are also now looking into, are we alone, or are we part of a bigger family of sentience
Right.
across the universe?
You know that quote from Arthur C. Clarke. He said, either we're alone in the universe or the universe is full of life. Both possibilities are awesome. You know, basically, it's staggering. It could, but the idea of this book is not that we could be alone and there's all these civilizations out there, is that we're not. There are people who have seen this. The US government, the Navy has just come forward and said, this is true. This is a possibility. Maybe I can just show a clip of one of these government insiders just to give people a perspective where now the official word is coming from inside the government, inside. So this was recently on 60 Minutes, and this gives a little background about where we're at in this disclosure.
We have tackled many strange stories on 60 Minutes, but perhaps none like this. It's the story of the U.S. government's grudging acknowledgement of unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, more commonly known as UFOs. After decades of public denial, the Pentagon now admits there's something out there, and the U.S. Senate wants to know what it is. The Intelligence Committee has ordered the Director of National Intelligence and the Secretary of Defense to deliver a report on the mysterious sightings by next month.
The story will continue in a moment.
1 second. Okay, here we go.
So what you're telling me is that UFOs, unidentified flying objects, are real.
Bill, I think we're beyond that already. The government has already stated for the record that they're real. I'm not telling you that. The United States government is telling you that.
So if that's true, Deepak, if the government is saying there's something out there, we don't know what it is, what do you feel the implications of that reality will be on civilization? If you could incorporate that into the next moment of our evolutionary history as evolving conscious beings, where now reality has just opened wide to a new possibility, what do you say as that potential for human growth and evolution?
Well, that potential for human growth and evolution has to be tied in with the potential for new technologies of communication as well. So as we speak, many people are talking about quantum computers, the quantum internet, where we will have instant communication. Instant means instant, without any weakening of signals, unmitigated, unmediated, instant teleportation of information in the beginning with any aspect of the universe. It doesn't matter how far or how near, we will have that. And having this new development in technology allows us, hopefully, theoretically, to communicate with other advanced technologies and technological innovations in the grand scheme of things. I recently also interviewed on my podcast Avi Loeb from Harvard Astronomy. He's the head of astrophysics there. And he, as you know, identified an object called Umama, which is an advanced technology object which could be from a future civilization. So it creates new ways of thinking. We can no longer think linearly. If you read, what's his name, Sean Carroll, who's a professor at Caltech, his new book called Something Deeply Hidden, he posits mathematically and according to string theories and other new theories like eternal inflation and multiverse, that there might be infinite universes. So that's mind-boggling. And, we would think that these infinite universes could be in other dimensions of space and time or other frequency domains of consciousness. Irrespective of that, the math suggests, and a lot of theories, advanced theories in physics suggests that, everything that we've considered theoretical, even Einstein's theories of gravitational slowing of time and the special theory of relativity, and now the quantum theories all suggest that, in fact, we are living in a multi-dimensional universe, and whether these are locations in space-time or frequency domains of consciousness is moot, as long as they are experiences. And if they're experiences, they are real, just as the Empire State Building is real. In the same way, they are real, and of course they are in consciousness. That's a different story.
Right.
But also leads us now to think, the most fundamental questions of existence. Where is past? Well, it depends on your location. Where is future? It depends on your location. Past, present, and future are totally entangled in what we call now. And with the new technologies, we may be actually able to visit the future, or what we think is the future, or the past, or even have experiences of other dimensions. Everything I'm saying now pertains and is true of information. So, in the world of experience, there's data, which is empirical facts. Then there's information, which is the resolution of uncertainty. Then there's knowledge. What do we do with the information, which can be used for both divine and diabolical purposes? But there's also wisdom, and wisdom says this new knowledge could make us members of a deeper reality, members of a grand universe, and members of a grand design, and members of a deeper mind, a deeper consciousness, members of the same body, members of the same mind, and ultimately entangled in consciousness as immeasurable, infinite dimensions of space-time and causality. So it's a new opening. It's a big revolution.
I think it's the most important revolution human society has encountered, the ability to meet the other on a different playing field. And I'll just quote from I'll quote you, I put it in my book from your conversation with Ben Bowler. And you say, humans think only of what is good for me and mine without realizing that me and mine is entangled with all of existence. We cannot separate the earth from its greater cosmic environment. What is needed is a new story. So if the greater cosmic environment includes other intelligences, we have to shift our limited point of view to include that reality. And what do you think is the best way to do that, to create this new story of a more inclusive consciousness and an ecology of mind?
I think if we really want a new story, then we have to understand what we mean by story. Our raw experience of existence is just what I told you: qualia, colors, shapes, forms, sounds, textures, smells, thoughts, feelings, imagination, creativity, insight, inspiration, intuition, vision, and transcendence. These are human capacities. And if we cultivate these, then we will actually answer some of the biggest questions of existence. What is birth? What is death? Are these mental constructs? Do we live in a timeless universe? is there at the zero ground energy field already the potential of infinite universes that, I think of a quote from the Rig Veda or Yoga Vasishta actually, which says, infinite universes come and go in the vast expanse of consciousness, like motes of dust dancing in a beam of light. So who is it that knows that? What is it that knows that? And I posit to you, it's not the human brain, because the human brain itself is an experience in the same way as the Milky Way galaxy is an experience. Right. So for a new story to be born, actually, we have to go beyond what is called situational creativity or simple innovation into a radically new way of thinking, which means a complete death of the old story and resurrection of a completely new story. So story means context, meaning, relationship, ideas, fundamental truths. Is the world physical? Is it non-physical? Is it formless? Is it with form? And as we start to look at these possibilities, it becomes obvious that all those statements are true. It's physical and non-physical. It's formless and with form. And if we navigate carefully the domain of both outer experience and inner experience. So outer experience is what you're talking about, with right. all the technology, and inner experience is going beyond the secret passages and the dark alleys and the ghost-filled attics of our conditioned mind into pure creativity. If we combine the two, then beyond the horizons of outer and inner experience are the raw materials of a new imagination that could lead to an age that even Homer never dreamed of, or the great rishis never dreamed of either. So a new dream is in manifestation.
Well, I want to talk to you about that new dream, but I also want to talk about where the old story has only served us up into a limit. It's created division. It's created this separateness. It's created a planet that is destroying its beautiful species because of what this idea of separation, that we're separate from others. So the new story has to include that we're all connected on the same planet. We're all one species. We're all one humanity. And yes, let's bring in that vision that was beyond Homer and Buddha and those realms of consciousness. What does that look like to you when we merge with that oneness?
Yes, so I would get rid of the word all connected, because connected is still space and time. I would use the word entangled, and or in superposition, or an experience as entangled. So our experience is entangled with each other's experience. Right now, you and I are having an experience, but a lot of people are entangled in this experience, and it's happening simultaneously because we all have the same link to the same construct that this is where you go to have this experience, right? But as the new technologies evolve, we'll see that we are not only entangled, qualia entangled, quantum entangled, experience entangled, we are entangled, period. And we are entangled with infinite forms and infinite vistas and infinite sceneries and infinite possibilities, all at the same time right now. So we need to actually, for the new story to be born, get rid of some of the old concepts like connection. Connection means we are having a connection through Zoom right now. It involves photons, electromagnetic fields. Entanglement occurs in electromagnetic fields too. I mean, there are lots of now experiments that show that if you have two particles that are entangled and they move at lightning speeds across space and time, if you measure one, you instantly know what the other is doing. It's like they're doing the tango. They're dancing together. One makes a move, the other makes a move that is exactly coordinated. And it doesn't matter where they exist. This entanglement is unmediated. It does not involve the usual signals that we talk about as electromagnetic fields, but a deeper signal. which is signal-less. So the entanglement is unmediated in terms of how we think of mediation or connection. It's unmitigated, which means the weakness of the robustness of this entanglement doesn't diminish with distance in space-time, and it's instantaneous. So, we've seen examples of this in science fiction when, the captain says, "Beam me up, Scotty." Scotty presses a button, and then, the captain disappears from planet Earth and finds himself somewhere else on another planet in another dimension of space and time. And he didn't go from here to there. He disappeared and was immediately somewhere else. This is already possible with information. Okay, but now how do we go from there to the entanglement of biological organisms and entangled species across leaky margins of space and time into other dimensions? The possibilities are beyond human imagination right now, and the story is emerging, and it's an open story, completely open story at the moment.
Well, maybe it's beyond human imagination, but it's not beyond an imagination of beings that are maybe using that technology to go from here to there. When UFOs appear in the sky, they can suddenly disappear and appear someplace else. So some people think that for these beings, quantum physics is not just a theory of observation, it's a practical application of consciousness itself, because consciousness seems to be the key factor in quantum physics maneuvering. It's consciousness, it's the observer that affects the experiment. So if that's true, let's say there is this technology that of the human mind and consciousness that these beings may have already developed. Superposition, entanglement. There's an essay in my book by Grant Cameron who says, if you see a UFO, you are entangled with that. They are entangled with you. There's no separation. It was meant to happen. So do you think we are at the beginning stages of understanding our mind and consciousness, not to bring in the whole consciousness beyond history thing, but that consciousness could be a tool for manipulating technology?
Consciousness is the source of all technologies and the source of all stories and the source of all constructs and the source of all minds. So when we say consciousness, you need an observer to collapse or whatever, to measure a particle. The question is who or what is the observer? Now, if you look at theories of relativity and even quantum physics, the Copenhagen interpretations, and also grand unified field theories where gravity is still not part of the equation, what you realize is that all these people who are talking about these ideas are assuming that there's an embodied observer. An embodied observer is not to be found. So, like there's no little Alan Steinfeld in the brain looking at the world through these eyes. There's no little Deepak in the body. Today we can measure a thought. You can take a carbon atom, radio label it, put it in a sugar molecule and watch what happens when it goes to the brain. But what you find is there are no sounds in the brain, there are no textures, there are no colors. All there is electrochemical activity. So we can track everything through technology, and we can track a thought, we can track a feeling, but we cannot find an observer. So we cannot, they say in religious traditions that the soul is in the body, and when the person dies, the soul leaves the body. I think that's a very, very primitive, naive interpretation. The soul, being non-local, cannot go anywhere. It has nowhere to go. It's non-local. It's beyond space-time. What happens at death is the body leaves, and what the body leaves is a verb, a process that began as a fertilized egg and ends as death. In between, there's a zygote, an embryo, an infant. And when you really go deep into this, you'll realize that science currently has three problems. One, it assumes an embodied observer, none to be found. Two, it believes in the subject-object split. Me and the universe are separate, not entangled. And three, matter is the fundamental, primitive, ontological ground of the universe. All three are wrong. So then nobody has ever shown a substance called matter. Nobody's ever found an embodied observer. And
my apologies. I couldn't hear what you said.
That's my Siri eavesdropping. Okay, there you are, entangled with my Siri. So nobody's found an embodied observer. Nobody's found a substance called matter. And the subject-object split is obviously artificial. So what's going on? Where is the observer? The observer is infinite, but it is using the human mind to make these observations. And the human mind is also entangled with that universal, non-local, single observer. So if I had to come up with a new mathematical description of this, I would say zero, which means the zero ground energy field, which is consciousness, is equal to one. It's all one field, is equal to infinity. And if we start with that premise, then definitely there's a new story. And making contact is actually unveiling the filters of the conditioned mind, which are already entangled in experiences in pure consciousness. I know this sounds very esoteric.
No.
We can go, if we understand the role of consciousness, conceiving, constructing, governing, and becoming what we call experience, then we have a new adventure, combining our understanding of who or what we are, not an embodied observer. You know, in the sum of the spiritual tradition said, they say, I'm not in the body is in me. I'm not in the mind is in me. I'm not in the universe is in me. But what is the me we're talking about? It's not the body-mind, obviously. The body-mind is the experience in me. So actually, it's pretty close to what spiritual traditions say, I am that I am. So before I'm Alan Rosenfeld, or before I'm sad, before I'm happy, before I have pleasure, before I have pain, before I think about death, I am. And once I start going, as I said, beyond the dark alleys of the conditioned mind, you find I am as the single 0-point energy field, infinite and formless, that is manifesting as form and phenomena. Every form is a phenomenon, and every phenomenon is the arising and subsiding of qualia, qualities of experience, in pure consciousness. Once we understand qualia entanglement, not quantum entanglement, which is great for technology, but qualia entanglement, then we have a new science that explores both the inner and the outer simultaneously. We create new mathematics with it, and with the new mathematics, which is very interesting because mathematics is also a qualia experience. So who knows mathematics? Where is mathematics in the universe? It appears on the screen of consciousness. So mathematics is the same stuff that stars and galaxies are formed of, or your body is formed of, or the internet is formed of, or the computer is formed of, but they just appear as different forms and phenomena. Once we understand then quantum and qualia entanglement will come together to create whatever we want to create. I mean, it's so interesting that we are already the creators of our reality, but we are unconscious creators of our reality. With these new mathematical models and physical models, and understanding the nature of perception and the entanglement of perception and emotions and thoughts and feelings and imagination and creativity, the horizon is never ending. It's a never ending horizon that we can look forward to. And we can also get rid of old constructs like birth and death because they make no sense. In the new paradigm, there's no such thing as birth and there's no such thing as death. There's only timeless now, which can manifest as past, present, future, whatever we want. provided we understand the alchemy of qualia entanglement.
Well, some people say that's exactly how these higher dimensional ET beings live, with that understanding of a transcendence of the historical perspective, and they can come in and out of our realities. And that's the problem people are having in the human dimension, in the 3D world, because they're confronted by beings that transcend the ordinary experience. So what does Deepak do when Deepak is, or you, confronted by something that's outside your realm of understanding, of experience, of possibility?
As I'm kind of spending a lot of time in reflection and meditation, and also on looking at the phenomena that we call birth and death and experience, my answer to your question is there's no Deepak. The Deepak is part of the dreamscape, and that we're all fictional characters in a collective dreamscape. But now, as we wake up to the dreamer, not to the dream, as we stop identifying with the dream, wake up to the dreamer, then there are infinite dreams to be manufactured. And it doesn't matter if you think of them as physical or non-physical, they are experience, and all we know is experience. So with the new understanding, I would say consciousness would be the ontological primitive. There would be no subject-object split, and you would see the entire multidimensional universe as entangled possibilities within the self. But within the self, I'm not talking about the selfie. Your body and your mind are selfies. You are the self. So what we are doing is right now confusing ourselves with our selfies. I confuse myself with Deepak. Deepak is a process in the self.
Mhm. So if the world woke up to that new story, what do you think it would look? How would we operate? How would society function? What would technology and schools and...
I think for the immediate, we would be able to create a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. Otherwise, as on planet Earth, we are definitely with what's going on with war, racism, bigotry, hatred, gender inequality, sexual inequality, racial inequality, power mongering, racism, bigotry, hatred, and mechanized ways of killing ourselves and each other. We are sleepwalking to extinction. So we need to wake up to this new dimension, to this new reality. And if we do, we can start with our planet, fix it, and then make contact with higher beings so we understand what the next stage of evolution could be consciously.
Well, that's also the subtext of this book. Making contact is making contact with ourselves, making contact with our planet. And then if we're open enough, making contact with other beings that are outside this realm of experience. You see, the reason I brought in this 60-minute thing, and there's also this government report that just came out, this preliminary assessment of UAPs as opposed to UFOs. They're calling them UAPs now because they've realized these are not just flying objects. These is phenomena. It's phenomena that affects consciousness. What were you going to say?
Every object is a phenomenon. There's no such thing as an object. If you look at an object, it's a phenomenon, and it's a phenomenon in consciousness. And the phenomenon itself is generated, conceived, governed, constructed, and comes into existence in our beingness, in our entangled beingness.
Well, this is what the government is discovering. That's why they're not calling these things objects anymore. They're calling it phenomena because it has an effect, a cognitive effect on consciousness. They actually say this in the report. So,
Alan, there's no such thing as a government. It's us.
Well, whatever you call the people sitting at the Capitol.
Entangled projection of us. We project it, then we give it authority when we created it.
I'm just telling you, there's people sitting in the Capitol building that call themselves government. And but they, what I'm only bringing that up because their official sanction of this reality
I agree.
Allows other people to explore that possibility.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just being funny.
No, I understand. And there is nothing out there but us. I mean, we're all here together. But in the illusion of separation, there seems to be this ongoing historical record that we are part of and adding to. So this phenomena is changing the way we look at ourselves. And some people need a movie star or Deepak or the government to say, this is real, or real in whatever terms, but I'm not expecting you to say that. But some people need that sanctioning of reality for them to have a different experience and a different story. Does that make sense?
It's perceived reality is shifting,
Right.
and it will continue to shift. It has shifted since the cognitive revolution. So, human beings have been on this planet only 200,000 years. Our planet is about 2.8 billion years or so. No, 2.8 billion years is life. Started with microorganisms called chemolitho-autotrophic hyperthermophiles. And here we are on Zoom,
Right.
starting as a microorganism on the rims of volcanoes. And all that happened in a few billion years. But humans have been around only for 200,000 years. The cognitive revolution occurred about 40,000 years when we started telling each other stories. The Industrial Revolution is only 500 years. We had the age of agriculture 12,000 years ago. Science is less than 500 years. And the real science that we're talking about, which has gone beyond physicalist science, is less than 100, or about 100 years, 1905 to now. So we are basically in the beginning of a major paradigm shift in science itself, in understanding what science is, and we haven't even started.
Right. No, we haven't started, but what if this opens us up, this doorway to these other realities opens our minds just possible. What if humans and what you're calling consciousness is not even of the earth? Maybe it's been brought here because we are different than the other animals. Apparently, we live in houses. We have these things called computers. We might be the alien consciousness that we're looking for. I'm just throwing out that possibility.
It's all entangled.
Of course.
65% of your genes are the same as a banana. 80% of your genes are the same as a fruit fly. 90% of your genes are 80 to 90% of your genes are the same as a mouse. You share 99.4 genes, 99.4% genes with monkeys and chimpanzees and gorillas. So who are we? We are entangled with the web of life. There is a unity of sentience across all of space-time, but at least on planet Earth, we call it the biosphere. And what we call genes are the symbolic representation of, I would say, conscious agents.
Right.
And when we say conscious agents, we're talking about ourselves. Now, in spiritual traditions, that would be called the soul. And then the bigger consciousness would be called God. But right now, that in a secular society, we're not allowed to use those words, even though they're beautiful words. God means generation, organization, and delivery of the universe.
Right.
What's better than that? Okay, but anyway, forget these religious terms, but we are conscious agents, and conscious agents are like branches from a tree. And, like branches of a tree are not separate, they're the same roots and the same trunk. So too, sentient beings across space and time are differentiated, and differentiation is not separation. Your eyes, your nose, your hair follicles, your teeth, your genitalia, your fingernails, your bones, they all come from one stem cell, pluripotential cell. And now, the eyes might say, oh, I'm separate from the heart, or I don't need to work for the heart, or heart says, I don't need to pump blood for the brain. What is it doing for me? And the brain says, the stomach is digesting food for itself. It's not that way. Every cell in your body is entangled with every other cell. It's also in synchronicity with every other cell. And it's also in non-local correlation and communication with itself. If only you could be like yourselves, you would be all set. Right. But, we've kind of sacrificed, as I said, ourselves for our selfies, and we have forgotten who we are.
One more question, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience who have a lot of questions about what we've been discussing here. Is that, let's say, this being Deepak, or whatever you want to call it, has an experience of something unknown. how do you frame it? How do you integrate it? How do you make sense of it? If you meet, let's say, an alien, or you have a meditation where beings come to you, or something is maybe confusing to your cognitive nature, because we're talking about cognition here. How do you integrate
Well,
new
right now,
cognition?
there's a lot of experiences people are having through psychedelics. A lot of people are having experiences through augmented reality, through dreamscapes. Every experience sculpts the brain into a new reality. And as the
Right.
brain sculpts into a new reality, the reality that we experience also changes. What we are recognizing through our technologies is, the brain, which is the interface between consciousness and what we call the physical world. And the brain itself is created by genes, but it is sculpted by experience. So every experience, including this experience, is changing your brain right now. The frontal cortex, epigenetically, genes are going on and off, new neural tracks are being established. So as we begin to sculpt the brain through these new experiences, we also construct new theories and new experiments and new ways of making observation to expand the range of our experience. And that is what evolution is. Consciousness evolves infinitely,
Right.
and the evolution is a never-ending horizon. So, what you fundamentally are, what you and I fundamentally are, or anyone is inconceivable, imperceptible, invisible, spaceless, timeless, causeless. Nothing conceivable or perceivable is you. But without the invisible you, there would be nothing conceivable or perceivable. That's where the universe is going.
I get that. And I think bringing in the sculpturing of the brain, which seems to be happening when people meet these other beings as a awakening of a greater humanity, is happening. So I think, Janet, did you have a question here, or did you can unmute yourself, or did someone have a question, Kathy? Because we want to take a few questions here.
Yeah, if you just do raise your hand and put the little symbol on reactions, then we can find you in the group and bring you forward to ask your questions. I have to say, Alan, I find this so amazing. It kind of awakens my imagination after having so much difficulty with our lives in the world. And it's almost like we can say, well, we must be entangled with these new beings that are coming into our environment already. So maybe we just have to, as Deepak was saying, sort of open that invisible space to make those connections. But are there any questions?
No, but I think you're right, Kathy. By opening up this other space, by knowing that we're consciousness, makes it easy, and not attached to the identity of this is me, makes it easier to interface. So that is a really great contribution, Deepak, to making contact, because we unattached from the identity, we can meet the other, whatever that may be, in a even playing field. Yes.
Yeah, there's no fixed identity to be found. Right. And that's the cause of all the suffering in the world. We think we are a fixed identity, but if you look at the wisdom traditions, they say there are 5 causes of suffering. Number 1 is you don't know who you are. Number 2, you're grasping and clinging at experience, which is ephemeral, transient, ungraspable. Number 3, you're recoiling from other experiences, which are similarly ungraspable. Number 4, you're identifying with yourself instead of self. And number 5, you're afraid of death. And they're all connected to the same thing. You do not know your invisible self. Only your invisible self is real. Everything else you can manufacture whimsically if you want.
Right. Well, I know some people. There's Shelley, my good friend Shelley. Shelley, come on and unmute yourself and just ask away.
Hi, thank you so much for the possibility to ask this question. So we were talking about, entanglement of all things, and for a moment we were talking about consciousness manipulating technology. As technology becomes quantum, through machine learning, and now there's the quantum supremacy computer great. Is it possible, and inconceivable, but is it possible that over time technology gains consciousness, becomes conscious?
So my answer is no, because I don't think I can't think of a physical machine wanting to have sex or feeling hunger or thirst or wondering about death or existential problems. It can simulate consciousness, but it cannot have a subjective experience because technology is just an extension of ourselves. And the best technology is still an algorithm, which is created in human consciousness.
Good. Yeah, I agree. It's missing a soul. It needs a soul, I feel, in order to have that observer of consciousness. But hey, Simeon, good to see you. And I just wondered, Simeon is a teacher of remote viewing, which is do you know about remote viewing, Deepak?
Yeah.
There's a transcendence of time, space, and non-locality. Can you jump in?
Yeah, it's non-local entanglement of visual experience. That's all it is.
So Simeon, can you jump in and talk about what you're hearing here as terms of the bigger reality? Yeah, thank you.
Oh, hey, well, thanks for having this event today. Great to see both of you again. Great to see you again, Alan.
Thank you.
Great to see you again, Deepak. Deepak, you referred a long time ago to this idea of the hypnosis of social conditioning. And I think what we're seeing with this topic is a sense of what is us, what is otherness. And they even use that word in the UAP report, other. And some of us on Twitter have been joking, we could call them the others. But when you call something other, it suggests it's alien. And perhaps this is sort of an extension of ourselves, a part of ourselves, our awareness that we're not even familiar with yet. That's why it seems like it's out there. But it's really we're part of a bigger family that we're just not aware of. So.
Yeah, so the hypnosis of social conditioning is the subject-object split. What we call the other is the self in a different uniform, basically. Your body-mind is a uniform, and the other is wearing a different uniform. And so you think it's the other, but actually as we move into a new science, it will be about the self-awareness or so-called other awareness, but also in the context of holism, and in the context of entanglement. And the time has come to recognize that. And, if there's one word we can use for that, ultimately, even though it sounds mushy, is love. Love not as a sentiment or an emotion, but love is the ultimate truth of entanglement.
What if we're confronted with a cognitive reality that's beyond our ideas of what do we do with something that we have yet to integrate into our reality,
I can give you the so-called heebie-jeebies, which is also called the dark night of the soul.
Right.
And we've all had those experiences. I've had those experiences. But if you stay with it, if you are aware of the experience without judging it, it leads to liberation. Every dark night of the soul dawns into a beautiful morning of ecstatic oneness. That is the only word I can use. Ecstatic oneness. Right. Love not as a sentiment, but as the ultimate truth of who we are.
I brought Simeon into this conversation because he teaches non-local consciousness, how to use consciousness. So what we describe as consciousness are all these qualias, but the use of that to transcend and then view objects is a practical application. Would you say, Simeon?
Yeah, because, as Deepak has been saying for so many years, we're hardwired to perceiving our physical senses. And what remote viewing shows us is that we have other more subtle perceptions, which, were known about thousands of years ago. It's written about in the Vedic literature. It's new for us as Westerners, but it's something that, people have been aware of for a long time. So remote viewing is a way to train yourself to not just perceive what's coming through your physical senses, but also through your more subtle senses. And it's quite possible that these beings that we call extraterrestrials will, in fact, not necessarily make their presence known physically, but through some sort of more subtle process. And people might start perceiving, it's just a possibility, more types of subtle awareness than they've experienced in the past. it's not necessarily going to be spaceships landing on, the White House lawn. It could come, through our awareness. I think that's definitely a possibility. And I think remote viewing, something that, Ingo Swann, the remote viewer, talked about, it could come across that way first rather than as a physical presence, even though, that's
I want to comment on what Simeon said, and
Yeah.
Alan, I also think we can expand this conversation a little bit, because what Simeon is talking about as remote viewing, extrasensory perception, these are in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, in the second chapter. These are called vibhutis or siddhis. And so actually I've been having conversations now with advanced yogis on how we can unfold these so-called siddhis, supernormal powers, which are dormant, non-local potentials that occur in human consciousness. If you go to our YouTube channel, the Chopra Well, you'll find a lot of conversations again on this topic, on vibhutis, extrasensory perception, dormant potentials, but also on what I call the case against reality, in that reality is not just out there, it's our projection. And I will also share with Alan some of the latest advances in science. There's a new issue of New Scientist, which talks about, 10 fundamental questions about reality and consciousness. I wrote an op-ed for that. I'll send it to you, Alan. And
Yes.
that's the new advances in artificial intelligence and technology that can lead into this new awareness. I'll do that after we talk. And if I may request, can you share it with everyone on this conversation?
No,
I think
absolutely.
it'll expand the conversation. More we expand the conversation, more we increase our awareness, the more we will discover.
Well, that's all I'm talking about in this book, is how to increase awareness of whatever is out there. It expands us as human beings. And so like remote viewing, we're using potential that we didn't know existed. But when we discover it, I've taught remote viewing too. 80% of the people know how to use this facility of the mind to transcend. There's Leanne, who's been in the class.
And
so
now we also have Zoom. This is remote viewing, right?
It is. And there's a great movie out called Superhuman, where this woman, Carolyn Cory, is teaching children to read through blindfold. So human potential is unlimited. And I think the UAP question pushes that envelope of possibility. It takes us out of the ordinary box, out of the mundane, life is an accident of creation, to realize that life is an emergent property of creation. It is abundant, it is everywhere, and it's on many, many forms and levels. So that's part of this. Let me take another question. It's great to see you, Francis. Do you have a question there, a comment? Because you've been following this, you read the book. And Jeffrey, I know, always has a question or a joke. Jeffrey, good to see you. You have a comment here? Just unmute yourself for a second. Unmute. This is Jeffrey Gurian, Comedy Matters. This is not a comedy. Can you see? Unmute, Jeffrey. Wait, you're still muted. Or are you just imitating silent movies? Oh, there you go.
Good. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Hi. How are you? Deepak knows me in another sense from my happiness center. Many years ago, we met during a synchronicity talk. But Alan, I've seen you do many events.
Right.
One of them with J.J. Hurtak,
Right.
who actually showed me pictures of aliens.
Well, there you go.
He says that they're located mostly in Brazil for some reason, that they live amongst us, and they seem to be alien forms. The pictures that he showed me, I'll never forget the story that he told me. He said that if we sent a spaceship to another planet and it crashed, and before it took off, rats snuck on, and the only thing that survived were the rats, whoever was on the other planet would think that rats flew that spaceship.
Right.
And he says that he thinks that these insect forms that he took pictures of was that kind of a case. He doesn't think that they were the ones that flew the spaceship. But I've been with you when we discussed orbs, and then orbs were in all my pictures for about 2 weeks. There were orbs appearing there.
Right.
So maybe you could talk about that for a minute. Are orbs extraterrestrials? Are they light beings?
I think because obviously they're showing up. Someone showed me a camera shot from a morgue, and they brought in a new body, and suddenly there was this flurry of orbs around as if there was a reaction to the new visitor. So I think orbs are intelligences. What do you think, Deepak?
I think you can project any experience you want, and you can embed yourself in it. And then it's like, you watch a movie, you embed yourself in it, and long after you leave the movie, it's still in your head. You're still rooting for the guy, and you're still feeling sorry for, whatever happened, and you don't like you like the villain, you don't like the villain, you like the hero. It's part of your story. So everything that we experience is conceived, constructed, governed, comes into existence in our awareness. We normally do it, as I said, through the hypnosis of social conditioning. So we squeeze ourselves into the volume of a body in the span of a lifetime, and we think that's reality, but it's not. Reality is infinite. The infinite cannot be conceived, but it can project itself as finite experiences, which include orbs and people like Alan Steinfeld and galaxies. Just remember that 50% of the atoms in your body are not even from the Milky Way galaxy. So, every atom in your body was manufactured in the crucible of a burning star. And 50% of them are from other galaxies. They came as a result of what is called gravitational wind. So who are you, even physically? You're the conspiracy of the total universe. You're an alien already. You're extraterrestrial. Why do we have to go elsewhere to find extraterrestrials? We are extraterrestrials because we came from 2 trillion galaxies right here on Zoom.
But the extraterrestrial part is the thing that's beyond. I'll read you this little quote of this poem by Rilke, who says, "A billion stars go spinning through the night, blazing high above your head. But in you is the presence that will be when all the stars are dead."
Lovely, lovely. I think that's a perfect way to conclude our conversation, because we could have this forever.
We could. Okay. Anyone else? Quick hello from
Thank you. Thank you both very much for this.
Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful, wonderful.
And just
I will send you some stuff, Alan. Can you share it with everyone on this?
Definitely, definitely. Thanks for your time, Deepak. And just stay open to what may be visiting you in the middle of the night and start making contact. We'll go out to the crop circles next year. We'll call in those ships. And I think a whole new reality is happening. Thank you, everyone. Shelley and Claudia.
Please read the book.
Sam.
Great book. Thank you. Thank you, Alan, for writing.
Okay. Thank you all for being here, Sam and Simeon and Tammy and Leanne, of course. And
God bless. Bye-bye.
all right. And I could just say thank